Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Lead, Sell, Grow the Human Experience podcast. I hope you guys are doing well. If you're not in the Facebook group yet, go join right now. Just pause the show, go to Facebook, Lead, Sell, Grow the Human Experience Mastermind, and tell me what you loved about this episode, because we have the amazing Esther Weinberg on a show. She is a business growth accelerator that equips executives in high growth industries to create big pivots, big impact, and big returns. As founder and chief leadership development officer of the Ready Zone, can't wait to hear about that. She powerfully fast tracks an organization's progress by focusing on the Ready Zone's 6 zone performance indicators, as she calls them, ZPIs. Esther's innovative strategies have assisted clients to grow, scale, and thrive in the worst and best of times, kind of like we're seeing right now. And she's worked with companies like Netflix, NBC Universal, Microsoft, ESPN, Warner Brothers Discovery, CNN, Dreamworks Animation, Adobe, Disney, IMAX, and National Geographic. If I continue with this list, we're going to be here all day. So without further ado, Esther, welcome to the show.
It's so great to be here, Eric. Thank you so much. I've been having a good time already.
Yeah, we had a pretty cool conversation so far. That's awesome. All right, Esther, talk to me about the Ready Zone. How did you come up with the idea? I mean, you were an executive with Disney before, correct?
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
What did you do there, and how was your experience before you kind of went off on your own?
You know, it was so interesting. It was different times, but similar times. I was heading up communications, publicity and corporate communications for Disney's owned divisions, I would say, for at the time, now I may be dating myself, for their cable groups. And I got to a place where there was 2 things where I realized that I wasn't sure if I was making the kind of impact that I wanted to. And also, I think I was burned out, and I had lost respect for the person that I worked for, my boss. And it was devastating because it was someone that I had looked up to for a long time. And I just knew I had to go. And I did something that very few people on the planet do. I was orchestrating my exit, and the day that I quit was the day my boss said, "It's time for you to go too." So I was like, okay, wow. This is really great. You know, very few people can make that happen at the same time.
Wow. So I will be remiss if I don't ask you this. Sounds like you had respect for this person, your boss. Yeah. What happened? How did they lose your respect?
I think what happened was, for a long time, like, I had known this person, you know, I'd worked with them off and on for a long time. They actually brought me over to Disney. And I think what happened was that there was a certain point in time when I started seeing that they were doing a good job, where they weren't their word, where they were managing up really well, but what they were saying to what I thought us as employees was actually not what I was seeing in real time. And I think the straw that broke it for me was that we were creating this new division for Disney. And all these executives kept coming to me saying, the leadership team that I was on kept coming to me saying, "What's the vision for it? What's it all about?" And I'm like, I have no idea. I keep asking, I'm not getting an answer. And so I said, you know what? I thought I was very clever. I said, I'm going to hire a media trainer, and we're going to get this person in a room, and I'm going to ask questions, and we'll get it that way, because maybe they don't know how to articulate it. We'll ask a bunch of questions. We'll cobble it together. No problem. I'm good with that. So we get in a room. The media trainer starts asking this person some questions, and then said, "What's your vision for this new entity?" And so this person looks at me and says, "Esther, what do you think?" And I pulled something literally out of my ass. So I said something. I said whatever I said, and I'm pretty good at positioning things. And she's like, "Let's go. Yeah, that's great. Let's go with that." And that moment, that was it for me. I thought, how can you work for someone that can't even know what they're creating? And so it's sort of like, I hate to say this, but as human beings, we're meaning-making machines. We talked a lot about that at the Ready Zone.
I posted that. If you go back to a few posts of mine on LinkedIn, like literally 2 weeks ago, I'm going to tag you in it after this. Literally, we are meaning-making machines. Did you go to Landmark?
I did do Landmark a long time ago. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. And so I'm a big believer in it, and so we, it's like that old Anais Nin quote, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. And so it affirmed my assessment. I had an assessment that wasn't necessarily grounded, or it was grounded whatever I thought. And then boom, in a minute, that's what it was. And so in that moment, I thought, it's not for me anymore. It's not for me anymore.
Okay, we cannot brush over the meaning-making machines.
Okay.
I think this is the human experience at its finest.
Absolutely.
And the second I understood that, I think the way I looked at life changed for me.
Yep.
So can you articulate in your best way what you mean by that for somebody who's not familiar with landmark and that methodology?
So first of all, let's step back, because I think what I'm talking about now is more ontological. Now, so Landmark, for those of you who don't know, and Landmark does amazing work, and they do work on the level of language, our linguistics, how we speak to people. What I'm talking about is an ontological approach, which incorporates your body, emotions, and language. So when I say we're meaning-making machines, it incorporates all three. What that means is that when something occurs to us, or as we're even thinking something in our body, there's physiologically a sensation that occurs. So that's the body level. It happens to all of us, right? You can think about it like, feel like you're sucker punched, or like your throat gets tight, your chest gets tight. And then you feel something. There's something that you feel. Now, it's interesting because probably if you were interviewing Brene Brown, she'd have, 80 some odd emotions that she'd be sharing, but we feel something, let's just put it that way. And then we express it. Now, what happens is, we're an observer of our own life, right? So the observer is making meaning out of whatever that is. So have you ever noticed, here's a clear way to say it. You ever notice you talk to someone about the same exact situation, they have a different interpretation than you do?
All the time.
Because we make something mean something, like I make this mean it's an espresso cup. Someone else could say, oh, look at that, it's a little coffee cup, So I'd I make meaning out of something. And then what happens then is I live into the meaning. And so that meaning may be accurate or it may not be accurate. And then when I choose to live into the meaning of that actually then creates my reality. So for example, Eric, I can make a meaning that you're a great guy. I love you. I love your smile, your laugh. And so we're going to have a great time in conversation today. And at the end of this conversation, you go, best interview I've ever done in my life. Okay.
I can already see that you're highly intelligent.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, and that's the meaning that you created, but I could also have created a different reality. Be like, he reminds me of someone that I worked with a long time ago, and kind of like has a smile that looked like that, but is really full of shit. So I don't know. And so what happens is that if you think about it, that's where suffering starts. So when I make a meaning out of something, and we can translate it both in life and at work, the moment that I make a meaning, then I live into it. Now, either what happened, and if I don't examine, because what you and I are talking about, the reason why to understand the breakdown of what you and I are talking about is because as a human or as a leader, because we were talking about leadership, is that if I don't examine the meaning that I make of things, then I don't know if this is accurate. If I don't question myself, not from a paranoid place, but if I don't go, well, let me ground that. Is that accurate? Is that who I know Eric to be? Do I have any history of him? No. Then why would I say that he's a crazy guy or he's full of it, right? I don't know him enough to do that. Or if I say, you know what, I've listened to several of Eric's podcasts, I've researched him. He really looks like a guy that is honorable, that is trustworthy. I love the photo of him and his family on his website. It looks like he's a man of high integrity. I'm going to go with that. It leads to two very different outcomes, which either then builds trust or respect or safety, or it erodes it, where I think is the essence of. Now, that may be more of an explanation you're counting on, Eric.
No, but I'll tell you, like in practicality, I worked with a woman who was deaf in 1 year. And I didn't know that at first. She wasn't 100% deaf, but she was legally, I think, deaf, but she could still hear a little bit. So one time we were kind of new, we were passing each other. I said, "Hey, how's it going?" and got completely ignored.
Wow.
The meaning I made out of that situation, she's rude, she doesn't like me, I must have done something before to offend her. What's going on? What did I do? Is she going to HR to like tell on me? Like she can, who does that? Who ignores somebody? You know, like the mind ran away with these meanings, and it happens in a split second, and it happens to all of us. And I use an example when I talk about this of, you know, the husband's downstairs waiting for a wife to come down for like a date night. The wife comes down, she's upstairs, she got ready, she looks beautiful. She comes down, he kind of glances up and says, "Hey, honey, is that what you're wearing?" What happens in that woman's mind? Does he not like it? Am I too fat? Does this not look good? Right? And most of it is negative. And then that causes emotions. I have to go change. I got to go redo. And all that happened was, is that what you're wearing? That's it. Okay. No, you did a great job explaining it. But we are so meaning making machines. And at the end of that landmark, when they said, you know, everything, life is empty and meaningless, I saw people get so upset. And to me, it was liberating.
It is liberating, you know. Well, you know, it's, you know, for those of you that are listening that may never have done the work, you know, it comes down to this, is that when you understand that we're making up so much of what our interpretations are. So if you understand that we actually have a formula for it, we call it the reality check, which I thought you'd love, which is that you look at the facts of the situation. So I'll give you an example. I had a client who called me and she was like, she was chief general counsel at this big company. And her boss is chief operating officer who has a law degree. You can already see he's a little bit of trouble. So anyway, so she calls me and she's like, "I'm done with him. I'm just done with him." And I said, "Well, what happened?" She's like, "Well, he promised me he wasn't going to be micromanaging anymore. He's going to step away from the details every single day. He was going to really further empower me because I am the chief general counsel." And he sends me this email. So I said, "Okay, well, read me the email." She's like, "I'll forward it to you." She forwards me the email. The email is like 2 sentences. So he literally asked her, she said, "The deal closed. I thought you'd be happy to know the deal closed." And I forget, I think she said the value of the deal. So he wrote back to her and he said, "Great job. Can you share with me the deal points? I'd love to know." So she's like, so I said, "Okay." So I get the email and I said, "Well, what's the problem?" She goes, "Can you believe it? He doesn't trust me." And I said, "Well, what's the evidence to prove that?" She goes, "Well, he wants to know the deal points." I said, "Okay, well, let's back up." So when we have a formula called the reality check. So reality check does several things. So number one, you just look at the facts. Like if I put you on the stand of a court of law, you swore your hand on a Bible. It's not about religion. You swore your hand on a Bible. Yeah, I actually tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth to help you. What actually the facts of the situation? So she said, "I got an email. It said this." I said, "Okay, anything else?" So she started talking about other things. I said, no, there's enough facts. She goes, "Okay, I got this email at this time of day. This is what it said." I said, "Okay, now tell me all the interpretations that you made, the meaning that you made of it." And I said, "I'm going to write them down." And we were on a Zoom session like this, right? So I said, "Just tell it to me." So she's writing down, "He doesn't trust me. He's micromanaging again, all these things." I had almost 2 pages filled with meaning, interpretations. So then I said to her, so then I copied so I shared my screen and said, "I just want you to look at all this." And I said, "Well, what is the impact if you choose to see it from the lens to which you are right now?" And she said, "Well, I'll leave. I'll never have respect for him. I'll never think that he can actually be his word, that he's not empowering, that he's, who knows, he probably was going to go several layers down." The impact was probably about 10 things that was impactful, including, like I said before, that she was going to leave. So I said to her, "Okay, well, let's go back to what is your intention of your relationship with your boss?" And she said, "Well, my intention with him, honestly, if I really had to be really honest with you, it'd be really about unity and collaboration." I was like, this is great. I said, okay, so if we put it together like a formula, helps when you're talking to a lawyer, because they like things compartmentalized. I said, okay, so here are the facts, sent the email that had these 2 sentences. Here's all the meaning. Here's the impact. You're going to leave all these things, but your intention is unity and collaboration. So given that, what action are you going to take now? She starts laughing. And she's like, you know what? I'm just going to email him back with the deal points. So that's what she did. She emailed him back, short email, 2 sentences, 3 sentences. Here's the deal points. He emails back. He said, great, congratulations.
Yep.
So that's what I'm talking about, is that the reason why we actually created a framework for it is because as human beings, we love to have frameworks. And that if I can actually stop myself, which it takes something to self-examine, then you can take a different kind of action. And that's what we're talking about. How can you take a different kind of action that could lead to a different kind of result?
Yeah. It's very interesting you say that, because that framework, I think, is more impactful when it's an outside person like yourself helping them walk through it. Because even if I had the framework and I was doing it myself, it would look something like, what actually happened. And in there, it would be, he doesn't trust me, right? Because you don't know that that's the meaning. You would think that that actually happened.
Well, Eric, it's so funny. I'll tell you a story. So I had another client call me, and she was like, she leaves me a message. She's like, you got to call me right away. She's so excited. I said, okay. So I call her and she says, so this is the head of creative for at one of the big studios in California. And she says, I'm in the meeting with the president of the company. And she said, and she's also in the meeting. She's the only woman in the room and the only diverse woman in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's all white men only, and she's a woman and she's Asian. So we won't go into that. But anyway, she's in the room and she's surrounded by the president of the studio and then a guy that is known to be a bully and then someone else. So a couple of other guys. Anyway, so she said, the person that I'm normally activated by, the bully, I'll call him the bully, she said, he's talking and literally my body reacted like it was a scene from Minority Report. So I've seen the movie. I don't know if everyone's seen the movie, but what she meant was that she said literally like almost either overlaying his face or on the side of him, there was a breakdown. What is he really saying? What is the meaning I'm making it? I was floored. She said, and I said, so how did the meeting go? She's like, well, I didn't take anything personally, which was huge. I didn't take anything personally. We actually came to a real conclusion of what we were going to do. And we came up with a strategy of how we're going to elevate the brand and take it to the next level. And I said, how do you feel? She said, I felt like a new person. And her boss was sitting next to her. And I asked him about it afterwards. He said it was the most unbelievable. He goes, I don't know what she did, but it was the most unbelievable thing in the world because I haven't been able to get her not to be reactive to this guy. And he's like, it's the first time in my life in 2 years that I've seen her not react to him.
That is really, really cool. So when you're working with leaders and you're coming in, what are you seeing as some of the mistakes they're making that have been pretty common?
Oh, well, I would say exactly what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, also, I think that especially today, so let's get clear on also what's happening today, right? Like everyone's talking about this level of the great resignation, right? But I would say that so many people have left corporate America. It's scary. I think that the data was that in September 2021, 4.4 million Americans actually left their job, and that was the highest since 2020. So if you think about that, that's happening right now. The most common mistakes I would say that leaders make is that they undervalue what you and I talked about before we got on camera, which was about trust, respect, and safety and the impact of that. Because this is that everything starts out as a profit problem, but it's really a people problem.
Always.
And so, you're staring at your navel, wondering what happens to your profit and loss in your balance sheet, but then you're unwilling to actually look at the internal mechanisms that actually contribute to it. Because I had someone ask me the other day, they said, hey, I had an executive complaining to me because they're hiring all these kids, which, hello, we have to change the language. We're hiring all these kids and they're leaving so fast. And I said, well, she's like, so what do you say to that? And I said, well, what are you inviting them into? It's like, so I think that we underestimate of what that actually takes. And I remember, I don't know if you've ever heard this quote from Stephen Covey. I love this quote. He said that, hope I don't butcher it. He said that trust is the glue of life. And I think he said it's the most essential ingredient in effective communication. And it's actually what holds relationships together. And so, and we have to remember that the world is changing so fast, work is shifting so fast. So we're expecting people to actually fit in certain boxes and models. And so what leaders are not doing is they're not doing a few things. Their communication sucks. So people are not being as transparent. And when I say transparent, I'm not talking about, I don't believe you should tell everybody everything. I don't think I don't think it's wise. I don't think it's smart, because I think that there's times to tell people certain things and times when it's going to send more panic. And not all the time does everybody have to know everything. I mean, look, you were in the military. Can you imagine if everybody really knew what was going on in the world? Sheer panic. The second thing too is that we're not creating a portable work culture. So many companies are in a hybrid work model. And so all we're doing is we're trying to move people back to a physical office because we think that that's going to fix everything. But before COVID, workplace culture sucked. And so by bringing everybody back, it's not going to suck less. It's just going to be the same thing. Now we see each other. So how do we actually we're focusing on the wrong things. How do we focus on trust, respect, and safety? And how do we do it in a way that then creates, and it's important because it helps with retention. And because I know, like one of my clients now, they're recruiting almost 300 people for jobs.
Wow.
So retention is a massive issue today. And so I would say that those are some of the ones that are essential. If 80% of employees are willing to invest their time based on their employers or their bosses' beliefs and values, you actually need to demonstrate that physically in the workplace. You do. And how you do that is by creating trust, respect, and psychological safety. If people don't have that, they will leave. Like when I was talking about my boss before, if she was her word, I may have stayed. I mean, my life would have looked very different. And so there is actually a real impact to it.
Okay. How did you come up with that as your lowest common denominator?
Which lowest common denominator?
Trust, respect, and safety.
Well, because when we looked around at the fact that organizations are changing so much. So I would say here's the genesis. I kept seeing organizations kept talking about change management. Change management. Going to import change management right now. Change management philosophy. We're going to do change management right now.
Conversation. Okay.
And I'm just like, change management is bullshit. Everything is change. And so what do leaders really want? They want to feel, you and I talked about this before, ready to powerfully take on all the opportunities and challenges at their feet. But how do they? And so we're not measuring people also according to the right things. So when we create an organization whose foundation, the culture is based on what we're talking about, trust, respect, and psychological safety, because there's real tangible numbers against that. That's not just valued, which no one would argue with, but it's measured as the bottom line. And that's why we created what you mentioned before in my intro, these zone performance indicators, because we know that they're KPIs. That's a diagnostic for actually how am I creating this organization that has this already built in, so that we can retain people, that we can actually create cultures of innovation and creativity. Because you think people are going to be creative when they're burnt out?
No.
People are not going to create. And can you imagine working for someone that way you don't even know what the hell the purpose is? There's just so many things that develop all over the map. So also if you're on a team where you don't believe that the competence level is the same, that will erode it all too. So how many times do people work in an organization where there's different levels of standards for different employees and different levels of tolerance of what people are willing to put up with? That, and in fact, will erode things and people will leave. So that's how we came up with the framework and the framework and the thinking that we were talking about.
It sounds to me like this is kind of like my framework for the subconscious mind and the actions and results, the actions we take and the results that we get. If the company doesn't have that culture in place, according to what you're saying, if they don't have trust, if they don't have, if people don't feel safe, and they're not getting the same results, what the company tends to do is change out the people. But all they're doing is planting seeds on concrete. So they really got to go back and take a look at their culture and develop that culture to then plant the seeds in the right soil so that the people can grow better.
Yes.
And so let me ask you this.
Yeah.
You go into an organization. How do you convince leaders, or what are some of the things leaders can do to develop more trust?
Well, there's a few things. And the one thing also that we did not mention that also amplifies it is hybrid work, because work is tougher when you're not in person with each other. Mm-hmm. So if you think about it, that it's more challenging. You can't read body language, you can't read facial expressions or nuances in voice. And so it's a lot more difficult too. So I would say there's a few things. So like when we talk about, let me just be clear when I've talked about these ZPI, these zone performance indicators. So we talk about 6 of them, and they actually mean things that are very plain, but more complex when you actually initiate them. So, and this is not necessarily in any order, but there's pivot ready, which is all around how are you creating a culture that is shiftable no matter what? What are the attributes, qualities that we need in order to make sure that we have an organization that can shift no matter what and is anticipating correctly to be able to navigate those shifts. So I'll give you an example for this. I'm currently talking to a multinational organization. They were only US based for a long time. Well, actually US and Canada for a long time, not US and Latin America for a long time. They've expanded to almost every single continent on the planet. They have exploded in their growth over the last few years. But what's happening is they have consumed all these companies, bought them all up, but they don't have one way, one actual culture, one actual way of even seeing leadership. So when we talk about how can they actually be more nimble for the future and to anticipate competition, they can't, because everyone's working differently and they can't shift together because they don't actually have any kind of unified culture to be able to shift together. Now that can transcend geography, cultures, communities, if you actually have that. Action ready, we talk about actually how are people living their legacy in their work? How do people have boundaries? How do they have a level of emotional agility? Influence ready is all around visibility and influence, because influence is the secret sauce of how you actually create anything or move things along inside of an organization, but you need to be visible. You can't be your own best kept secret. Connect ready is the consistency in your communication. Impact ready is building teams, and culture ready is having it, and I really believe this is true, having a culture inside an organization where coaching and mentoring, people are constantly giving back to each other. There's a multinational organization we're working with now that their HR leader, and I think and their president, which I think is enormous, is their whole aim, and the HR leader and I laugh, is like, we want to get ourselves out of a job inside the company. So we've created, this is the 3rd year we have a mentoring program going. And what we want to do is create this whole culture where everyone's coaching and mentoring each other, so they don't need us anymore. So they don't actually need us anymore. And so these are the kinds of, so within these zone performance indicators, I mean, we have our own assessment that we deploy that you can measure it. But this is a way that a leader can aim their arrow. Okay, well, for me as an executive, Which one of these zones am I leaning into? Where am I leaning out of? What's important for me to be more aware of for me? Second thing is around the team level. What do I need to be aware of? How my team is functioning, the wholeness of that. And then the third level is the organizational level. But you got to work first from yourself. I mean, you know this, so you have to work from you first. But what I find is that, like I was talking to an executive yesterday, when you're thinking about changing and when you're thinking about creating more of a workplace culture like this, a lot of people don't know where the hell to start. They don't know where to start. And it's not that I know a lot of leaders that are very well intended. They want to do the work, but they don't even know where to begin because work has quadrupled and they can't even focus. And so who the hell has time for all this? That's what people tell me. Who has time for all this? They know it's most important, but people don't even know where to start. So that's where we find that the zones are even more valuable. So a leader can say, you know what, I'm going to start here. Even if it may not honestly be the top one, Eric, you know this, at least they're starting somewhere. And once they create an impact. So for example, if I'm working with an executive now who is so inconsistent in her communication, it makes her team insane. She'll send them emails. They don't even know what to do with it. Like, what is she asking me to do? I don't even know. And they have a multi-million-dollar budget inside of their organization, and they're not sure what she's asking of them.
How did you figure that out? Do you send an assessment to the whole team to see what they think of the leader?
Yeah. So what happened was that there's an organization. This is brilliant. So what happened is that I was doing executive coaching for her, and then we had talked about doing an assessment for the team, assessing where they are in terms of all the zones. And we decided it right before, timing is everything, the organization just merged with another massive organization. So now you've got like culture on culture on culture on culture. And so what we were talking about is you can only control your small fiefdom because everyone is waiting. It's like staring at your navel. Everyone's waiting to someone to tell them strategy, direction. I was like, you can't wait. So what we're doing is with her team is assessing the workability of it, creating direction as fast as we can with them. It's almost like an agile methodology, but within the team, and then moving them. So it was through an assessment. And then now it's what we're doing now post-assessment.
You might need a Napoleon's corporal.
I think so.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, that's somebody that you send your communication to first and then have them repeat it back to you. And if they repeat it back the way you intended it to sound, then you send it to the rest of the team. But before that, do not send it to the rest of the team.
You know, it's so funny because how many times you can relate to this? How many times, like I'll say to someone, I'll say an executive, they'll say, I can't believe fill in the blank. And I'll say, well, did you communicate clearly to them? Of course I did. I said, okay, well, how do you know? What do you mean, how do I know? How do you know? How did you know you were clear? So
they hate you at times, don't they?
Like, how do you know you were clear? Well, because they were doing something. I said, well, they did actually the opposite of what you said. So does that mean that they're off or you're off? So said, it's actually quite simple. Why don't you just ask? Sometimes I find that with leaders, they're so, I think that there's such a pressure, and I mean this truly, is I find with leaders more today that there's this pressure to know and then to be able to make decisions based on the knowing. And the truth is that knowing actually is a construct that you made up based on who the hell knows what. And if you actually ask either your team or peers or other people, that you don't need to, it actually, that's where the knowing comes from. So it doesn't have to be from the genesis of you. It can be from the genesis of great people who are smarter than you, that know what they're doing better than you, which isn't that the essence of a great leader? Yeah. So I think there's, you have to remember that we're still in a massive squeeze play right now, where we're still in a pandemic, even though a lot of people think we're coming out of it, but cases are rising up. The world is the way that it is. It looks like who the hell knows, but we may be going to war. And so, there's the inflation's up, there's so much economic, social, we won't even go to social issues, political pressures and then there's workplace pressures that are impacting every single person. Then now people are transitioning to go back to work when they didn't have to commute an hour and a half each day and leave their 3 kids at home or their aging parent that they had to take care of. And so there has to be some acknowledgement of the what's so that's occurring now that's stressing people. And so we need a new playbook for leadership that's very different than even what we had, I would say, 6 months ago or a year ago.
Wow. And so how do leaders assess? So that's where your assessment comes in. You're helping leaders assess, better understand kind of where their team is so they can better prepare and focus on the things that really need either improvement or change or attention.
Yes, very much so. And I think that it's, look, you know, just because you're aware of something doesn't mean you're going to change it. I mean, just because, I mean, there's so many people I know that are geniuses, but it doesn't mean they're changing a goddamn thing. And so, you know, like there's an executive that I work with, and when we did an assessment just on her leadership, and it just showed that she's sharp elbows, incredibly demanding, a genius, but a horrible people manager, horrible. And she's managing teams globally, horrible people manager. 3 people left the team. 2 of them said it was because of her, but no one ever actually told her that.
Oof.
So she can't even properly assess her own measure of leadership, but she'll say to me, I know I should be doing X, X, Y, Y, Z, Z, whatever. And so that's where coaching comes in. You know, it's like when we run the mentoring program that I mentioned to you before, the one thing I say to the mentors is that, you know, I'm so excited for you. You signed up to be mentors. I'm so grateful to you. But here's the bad news. So bad news is that you signed up to be a mentor, but I'm actually asking you to coach people because they're going to be stuck and you're not going to know how to solve it. And it's actually not about you solving it. It's about you making sure you ask. You have such great inquiry lens that you can ask such great questions. It's like Mark Brackett. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's the head of emotional intelligence at Yale. And he said you have to move from therapist to curiosity pilot. Mm-hmm. And I really think that that's the lens that if you could just do one thing as a leader, if you could move to a curiosity pilot, not even from a therapist, but from what you think is a boss to a curiosity pilot, I actually think that 50% of the issues inside of organizations would disappear.
Yeah, that was a tough one. I remember when I was leading a team for Xerox, they came up with this new, you know, we want our managers to be coaches. And so what I found is now I've been certified as a coach. I mean, I know what coaching is and I know what lens you're looking at it through. But what I found in the corporate world, for a successful coachee relationship to happen, the coachee has to want the coach.
Absolutely.
And so what happens in the corporate world is the organization says, okay, you're no longer a manager, you're now a coach. You're not a mentor, you're a coach. But the people that they're coaching didn't want to coach. So I had a salesperson come to me. I'm the sales manager / just turned coach yesterday, right? And I can't give them answers. Salesperson comes to me and she's like, all right, so I gave a proposal. I called them and they said they're looking at 3 other proposals. What should I do? Now I know the answer. This is a new rep who just got out of college 2 months ago. And I don't know how to be a coach at this point. Well, if this was your best friend, what advice would you give them? I believe you do have the answer within you. Oh my God, it was a shit show.
Oh, I would imagine. You know, look, I think that it comes down to this, and I think this is a kind of a brain twist, okay? As humans, we think that in the level of performance, we take actions and our expectation is results, right? So then if we don't get the results that we anticipate, we take different actions. Now, what happens is that if we keep doing that, it's like Einstein's definition of insanity, right? But what it goes back to is where you and I started this conversation, is you have to remember this is very simple. The observer that you are takes certain actions that leads to different results. But the issue is not in the actions, it's in the observer. So it's the observer and the way that you see plus the action that leads to the results. And that observer is based on body, emotions, and language. And most times we actually, thank God for people like Mark Brackett, Susan David, Brene Brown, because they're starting to talk about emotion. Well, emotion's been talked about for a long time, but now we're getting serious about it, right? We've been talking about language for a long time. We haven't even talked about the body. Because like a mentor of mine used to say, my body's a pedestal for my head. So it's like, we're not paying attention to the cues that actually shifts the observer, because then the observer will, if that changes, then the actions will be different. So the formula is easier to understand that way. So if you're an executive and you go, I keep taking actions, they lead to different results. Well, then you have to sit back and go, okay, well, what am I experiencing? What am I feeling about it? And then how am I speaking into it that's actually enabling me to take the actions that I am? So something within that formula is off, or I'm not honoring it, or I'm stepping over it, or, on and on and on.
I go to a self-image, right? It's like Maxwell Maltz psycho-cybernetics. You'll never outperform your self-image and your internal belief system. So I remember I was coaching a sales professional. He was in the technology field, senior guy, and just has the worst call reluctance ever. So I'm like, okay, help me understand this. You said you were going to make X amount of calls. You scheduled the time. What did you actually do during that time? Oh, I started browsing through my emails, and then I went and, just the typical. I'm like, why did you do that? Well, I don't want to be a pest. Like, tell me about that. How do you feel about salespeople? He's like, man, salespeople, he had a whole list of like this negative shit he believed about salespeople. And I'm like, of course, you're never going to outperform yourself. You're never going to make a call if you're a salesperson who believes salespeople are just people who are going to rip you off, try to steal, lies, sell you some stuff you don't need. Why would you ever make a call? And I think that's what you're talking about. So he tries to change the actions, but until he changes that belief system of how he views salespeople, nothing's going to change.
Very much that. The other thing too is there's for people that like formulas, there's another way that we think about things when we talk about change. There's there's something that we call pivot moments, which is about, if you really, and it takes self-awareness, if you really look at what's your emotions about a situation, how do you feel about it? How do you really feel about it? And this does take some work. Like, you actually need to, and for us to have the language, the emotional vocabulary to be able to express what is really true for us, right? Because stress is very different than disappointment or heartbreak, very different. So your emotions plus your experience, what's your experience about the situation plus your actions, if you actually can look at it like a map, like let me just look at what am I really feeling? What's my experience about? What actions am I really taking? Like what you're talking about, this person, right? It's browsing the internet, whatever it is. Okay, then that shows me how aligned I am. Then I know what I can start and stop doing in order to create a different kind of outcome. But until you know that, you actually can't at all. So I'll give you an example. There's an executive, and she was brought onto a team, and the reason why she worked for this, that she chose to work for this boss, is because she's renowned in her field. Like, almost like she was, thanking the universe for getting this job. I mean, she's amazing too, but the opportunity to work for this person is like, died and went to heaven, right? So anyway, she's working for 2 years, and she realizes she's a horrible people leader. She does not know how to manage people. She's promised this woman a promotion twice, can't even articulate why she's not getting promoted while she's doing the work. And so she's like, I'm angry. I'm really angry. I'm really frustrated. But what we really got to is she was heartbroken. because she thought she'd be mentored by someone she considered a true legend. And she's completely heartbroken because she felt disillusioned. And once she got that, the action she could take was very, very different. Because then she could see what she was doing was she was ruminating about it. What she kept doing was she was ruminating about it. She kept trying to solve it or engage her in conversations that were completely not productive, or trying to, or bypassing team members because they were displaying the same behaviors as her boss was. And she was like, this is crazy. No one's setting strategy. I have to, because her boss couldn't set strategy, which is nuts, right? So once she got that she was heartbroken, then she got what she could actually do about it. Then the kind of transparent conversation she could have with her boss was very different than what she had before. And it completely changed the dynamic of their relationship.
Wow, that is huge. The last thing I want to talk to you about, because I promised you when I begged you to come on the show, I promised that I would have you off by a certain time, and we're 5 minutes away.
You're an angel.
And I'm so enjoying this conversation. You mentioned the term dignity, and my old partner, my old podcast co-host, when we split up, he actually wrote a book. His name is Harry Spate, called Selling with Dignity. He's all about dignity. And so when you said dignity, I'm like, okay, Harry, by the way, you guys should probably connect at some point. How do leaders help people? One, why is dignity important? And two, how can leaders help people feel like they have dignity?
Well, I think it's the essence of so many issues, and especially so many issues that we're having with diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And so dignity as essence is the right to exist, the right for you to be you, period. Now, when I say that to leaders, sometimes I'll say, well, what does that mean? I mean, I can't fire anybody because they have the right to be them, whatever the hell that is. And I say, no, that's not what that means. What dignity means is that you treat someone as what we've been talking about this whole time, with trust, respect, unless they give you the opposite. And you provide the environment by which they can exist and they can do the best work, where they know it's safe to actually do it. Now, psychological safety is everything. So if leaders can provide that, that's where dignity comes in. Now, it doesn't mean that if someone's not performing, that you don't usher them out of the organization. You do. You just do it with dignity. Not you come in on a Friday at 4 o'clock, your stuff's in a box, and there's a security guard and they toss you out on the door, out on the curb. Like, bye, thought you were great, but I'm out. So when I talk about dignity, it's actually been everything that we've been talking about, because the essence of it is, how do you facilitate a place for people to feel that they can actually really be who they are, and that the organization, they trust that when the organization says something, they can be it. I mean, the big uprising with Disney inside is because they said one thing, put money against that one thing, and then did something else. And so there was a massive uprising in the LGBTQ community, to which I'm a part of, because they didn't honor their word. And so how do we feel as employees that we can be in an organization that can operate with dignity now if you can't be the word that you say it is? I can't trust that. And so it's not safe for me to be me, whatever that looks like. And so that's the kinds of things that I'm talking about, is the ability. And I mean that, and what I mean too is the world of all of it. That means if I'm going to sign up for that, if I'm committing to that, creating an environment of dignity, which is about trust, respect, and safety, that means I'm going to have conversations with you. Yeah. I'm going to tell you if you're doing great work or you're not. I'm going to celebrate when we all win, we all do great things. I'm going to make sure if the team is not operating, I'm going to be the first one to actually line up and say, okay, what are the qualities that I need as a team leader to do differently? Qualities of my team members to do differently in order to have a higher level of performance. How am I actually creating a place for people to have visibility and influence? How am I actually making a space for people to actually express themselves where it's safe to do so without the attachment that I'm going to make them right or wrong about it. It's not about me making them right or wrong. It's about me actually hearing people. So those are the kinds of things that I mean when I'm talking about creating an environment of human dignity.
Okay. I'm going to say thank you for that. I wish we had more time because I would love to ask you more questions on it, because there's, like, we started off with meaning making machines.
Huh?
And there's something I might say, and someone from the LGBTQ community might make a meaning of that.
Yep.
And say I made them feel unsafe.
Right.
Without me ever even knowing if I made somebody feel unsafe. Like, I'll give you an example. I was talking to someone, an African-American gentleman.
Yeah.
Like, came into a conference room. Every other manager, and there's like a manager's meeting. Everybody's a white guy. One black dude comes in. To me, he's just a manager.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're just another manager.
Mm-hmm.
To him, he's one African-American guy in a group of all white guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even remember when we had that conversation. I kind of opened my mind, like, okay, he doesn't think what I think when we're in the same circle. And actually, most people don't. It's kind of interesting. If you have that type of relationship with someone, take them off to the side and ask them, like, hey, how do you feel in these situations? What goes through your mind? Because I want to make sure I understand. But I can't control if somebody feels safe or not. I can't control if they feel like they're not being, I make them feel unsafe if I came to work with a MAGA shirt on, or I have a MAGA flag on my car and they're offended by my political beliefs or whatever, right? Like, I can't control that.
Now, it's interesting because nowhere within what I said is about you being able to control the perception of somebody else.
No, that's just what I interpreted it as.
That's right. So I didn't say that. So here's the thing is that, like, I was talking to an HR leader the other day, and I said, and she's facilitating these very difficult racial conversations inside her company. And I know her chief diversity officer. He's this amazing guy. He's Black. She's as white as anything. White, blonde hair, blue eyes. So I said to her, if you facilitated this conversation with him in the room and you agreed with him, like he's the most lovely guy on the planet, that if you said something wrong, you stepped all over yourself, that you and he would start talking live about what that is. And you'd be the example. And so would he. Would you be open to that? And she said, absolutely not.
Why?
She was afraid.
Huh.
Now, look, I can tell you as a woman who's gay, I have had the most ridiculous things said to me, including my mother said to me the other day, you'd love my doctor. And I said, why would it? My mother lives in New Jersey. She doesn't even live near me. You'd love my doctor. I said, why? She goes, because she's gay. I said to my mother, what does that have to do with anything? So insulting. It's my mother. So the thing is that there's a few things. One is that I can't control the meaning you make of something, but I can take responsibility for it once I know about it. And I can heighten my awareness to do what I can to create an environment where that can shift. Because look, I really believe communication today is a minefield. It's really, really a minefield. But it's how you handle the communication when you misstep, when you know you misstep, how you inquire about how you're going to communicate to people. Look, I can't, even me as someone who's gay, I know I'm going to say something stupid to someone who's a person of color. I know I will. How can I not? It's blind to me. But it's how I can invite them to be honest with me back, how I can create that space, and how I can take responsibility for what I've said. Look, there was
Give me an example of something stupid that somebody could say.
Someone said to me the other day that there was, that they made a racial slur, but they didn't mean that it was racial. About, it was like, I'm like the soup Nazi. They said the other day to someone, and the guy said, I'm Jewish. That's really offensive.
Why did they say he's a soup Nazi? Like a Seinfeld?
Yeah, she's like, she goes, oh, or you're like the soup Nazi. And he was like, he's like, that's really offensive. It was like they were in a they were on set and it was lunchtime. And I feel like I think he said something and she was like, "Oh, you're like the soup Nazi." And he's like, "That's really offensive. I'm Jewish and my family's from the Holocaust. Like a lot of them died and some of them survived." And she said the same thing 3 times. The company launched an investigation because there was a complaint about her. And all I thought was that if someone said to you that it was offensive the first time, wouldn't you know not to do it? Like,
Yeah.
And then when it was brought up to her that she did it, okay, so she was really clueless about it. She brought up that she did it. She was defensive about it. So that's what I'm talking about. So if you did that and you were clueless about it, like let's just take totally clueless, but someone brings it to your attention, there's a moment where I understand that she'd be defensive, but take a beat and say, if I was in the shoes of that guy, maybe I can't relate to it, but if I was in the shoes of him, he was really offended. I may not agree with that, like the MAGA hat. I may not agree with that, but you know what? I'm going to go and I'm going to apologize because it was wrong. That was wrong of me if he felt marginalized by it.
Fair enough.
And so that's the kind of thing I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think as long as communication's open and people let each other know, like, hey, by the way, when you said this, this is how it made me feel.
Yeah, otherwise I can't take responsibility.
If
you're offended by something that I said and I don't know about it, how can I do anything about it?
That's key. That's key.
That's the job of the leader, the kind of environment that they create. Anyway, we could talk forever, but I think.
And Esther, it sounds like, and that's a hard job, by the way, because leaders are not equipped to handle these types of conversations, right? Half the time they're in that position because they were good at doing whatever they're leading at now. And that's what your company does. You come in, you help equip these leaders, you give them tools they need to understand their team better, communicate better, and get better results. So Esther, thanks for being here. I'm sorry I took a little bit more of your time, but I really appreciated you and it was great to meet you.
Oh, Erica, it's wonderful. Thank you so much. Anytime. I would love to do it again. All right. You be well, sweetie. Thanks again. Bye.
Bye-bye.